Okay, this lecture is going to cover setting up the main method so that my game can get started. In a previous lecture, we talked about creating a class, a basic game class, using the Slick libraries, getting the libraries connected to my project, and then using the create class dialog box to automatically create a constructor for the base class, which is what that is, to automatically create the three abstract methods from the base class, which is render, init, and update, and to create a main method. All of this was done. At this point, there's no code in any of the methods except for the constructor for the base class. Okay, what we want to do is we want to put in some code so that this game, the one I just am filling in here, will actually execute when we run main. Okay, now the way this works is we want to create something called an app game container, and all of the stuff we're doing is contained in the Slick library. So all of these objects and classes are already defined for us. All we have to do is use them. So what I want to do is I want to create the app game container. So I want to make an object, app game container, and then just whatever I want to call it, okay, equal new app game container. Since this is an object, I got to specify new, and then the app game container is going to take an instance of my game, my basic game. So I want to create an instance of my basic game. New my basic game, and that's going to be how I create an app game container. Now, notice that I get a red underline in Eclipse because Eclipse doesn't know about this thing. So the way to quickly solve this is move the mouse over the object that has a red underline, and it will give you some ways to resolve the problem. It has a bunch of fixes in mind. The one we want is to import the file. So if I move it over and click import, go up here, and you notice it's been imported in the import statement. Okay, so it automatically did this for me. Eclipse did this. Now I've got a second red here, new my basic game. Okay, well, if I move the mouse over this, notice it suggests, it said, when I create an instance of my basic game up here, right, notice my constructor has a parameter, a string. So when I create my basic game, I need to give it some kind of a string. So if I move the mouse over, it tells me what I have to do. So I want to put in here game title. Okay. Now there's a new red underline we'll talk about later. But the bottom line is I've created a constructor for my game. My object here is then being used to pass into my app game container. Now what I could have done, we're kind of doing this by creating an anonymous object in here. What I could have done is something like this. It works the same way. Okay. So in other words, I could say my basic game equal new my basic game title, and then instead of passing the anonymous object like I'm doing here, I can just pass mbg, same thing. Okay, it's exactly the same thing. The reason I put this statement inside the parameter for app game container is that it's just a shortcut. I'm never going to use this object again, so why not just put this expression inside the parameter to create the app game container. Okay, so I need to do this. This is step one in my main. Step two is to use the object AGC I just created, and I set display mode. Notice Eclipse comes up with the appropriate function as I start typing. So I want to create a width and a height. This is the size of my game window. So let's say 300, comma, 300, comma, and the third option is going to be a Boolean, true or false. Full screen or not. Well, I'm going to say false because I don't want it full screen. Okay? That's going to be the second line in my main. Okay? The third line, not counting my definition of my basic game object, the third line is going to be show FPS, okay, is showing FPS, or set show FPS false. Okay. What this does is this prevents the FPS, frames per second number, from being displayed on the game window when I run my game. If I leave this line off, or if I set it to true, it'll display a number on the screen that are the frames per second it's using to redraw the screen. Okay. The last one is to start my game going. So I say AGC start. So pretty much every game I create using the Slick library, my main is going to look exactly like this. Now there's one more thing I want to do. Notice I get red underlines around some of the statements. The reason is because these are going to throw exceptions. And what I want to do is I want to deal with the exception. If I move the mouse over one of these, notice it says unhandled exception, type Slick exception. So I want to do a try throw. Well, here's what I want to do. I use the mouse to select all 4 lines. Okay. I move the mouse over the selected text. I click the right mouse button and I select surround with try catch. What Eclipse did was it put a try and a catch block and then the Slick exception. And then here's where I can deal with the exception. Print stack trace. Well, if I want to do something else, I could say system out print line error starting game. Okay. And I've now got my main method done. So, to review, I type in these 4 lines, or 5 actually, exactly like I see. I figure out how big to make my game window, 300 by 300. I figure out if I want it full screen or not, okay? And then I select the lines and I right click and pick surround with try catch. Eclipse puts in the try and the catch and I'm ready to go. Okay. A typical game would be the width and the height. Okay. So 640 by 480 is a low resolution game. False would show me a window. True would force it to be full screen. 1024 by 768. Okay. What if we ran this program just like we got it? What would we get on the screen? Well, let's save it. And let's just run it. And there it is. I haven't set the background color, but this is my game window. Okay, 1024 by 768. When I'm finished, I can close it. All the rest of this is taken care of by Slick.